She poured 3 years of love and creativity into a relationship and a dream, only to be blindsided by a public engagement and a stolen design. Ji-eun, the powerful heiress, used smiles and silence to erase Seo-yeon's name and claim her work as part of a calculated move. But fate had other plans, and one hidden flash drive changed everything. Wait until you see how this quiet betrayal exploded in public and why justice, in the end, spoke louder than power. Seo-yeon was folding laundry when her phone buzzed. At first, she ignored it, probably just another flash sale or weather alert. But something in the stillness of the room made her glance over. The screen read, "Breaking, Hano Group heiress Ji-eun announces engagement to Min Jun-han at Yeouido Gala." She blinked, once, twice. Her breath caught mid-motion as the folded shirt slipped from her hands and landed soundlessly on the floor. There was a photo attached. Min Jun stood in a tailored charcoal suit beside Ji-eun, elegant in white satin, both of them radiant under the blue-white lights of a grand ballroom stage. They were framed by floral arrangements and suspended golden lettering that spelled "Together Toward Tomorrow." His hand rested lightly on her back. They were smiling, his familiar smile, practiced and careful, the one he used for people he didn't know well. Seo-yeon stared at the image longer than she should have. Then she stared at the date. Today. Not next week. Not after a phone call. Not after a conversation, a warning, a word. Just today. She read the headline again. The phrase "power couple" stuck in her mind like a thorn. Her chest didn't burn. It didn't shatter. It simply stilled. A week ago, Min Jun had told her he needed space. "Just a little time to think," he'd said, taking her hand across the table at their usual cafe, his thumb grazing her knuckles the way it always had when he didn't know how to end a sentence. "Think about what?" she had asked, smiling through the nervous twist in her stomach. "About what's right for everyone." She hadn't understood then, not fully. She thought maybe it was stress. His father's condition had worsened, and the family business was clearly struggling. She thought she was giving him space to breathe. Instead, she had been giving him space to leave. Min Jun's decision hadn't come from cruelty. At least, that's what he told himself. His family's small auto parts company, Han Precision, had been bleeding cash for months. After their key supplier defaulted, orders were delayed, clients left, and the banks started calling. At night, he stared at spreadsheets instead of sleeping. By day, he fielded messages from creditors, his father's doctors, and a mother whose voice grew more brittle with every passing week. Han Yesuk, his mother, had always been composed. Immaculate hair, ironed collars, a voice that could soften or sharpen depending on the room. But desperation had a way of turning even the most controlled people into beggars for normalcy. "You don't have the luxury of marrying for love," she had said, folding a napkin at the dinner table until it resembled a perfect triangle. "A sun protects the roof. You have to think bigger than yourself." Bigger than himself. That had been the phrase, the excuse, the justification. Marrying Ji-eun, daughter of Yoo Myung-chul, CEO of Hano Group, meant more than prestige. It meant financial relief. It meant the bank would stop calling. It meant his father's surgery, long delayed, could finally be scheduled. It meant hundreds of jobs could be saved. He told himself it was a sacrifice, that Seo-yeon would understand one day, that maybe in another life they would have made it. He convinced himself that breaking one heart was the cost of saving many. Ji-eun had her own reasons. Publicly, this engagement was a strategic move, a power merger masked as romance. For years, she had lived under the suffocating title of nepotism princess. No matter how sharp her mind, how efficient her deals, everything she touched was dismissed as inherited. But Min Jun, clean-cut, respected, humble, was an image of merit. Their union suggested she could see beyond legacy, that she could lead not just because of her name, but because of her choices. Privately, Ji-eun was tired tired of being introduced as someone's daughter, tired of expectations dressed up as praise. She wasn't naive about what the engagement meant. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was alignment, strategy, a rare chance to be respected. When she read the comments under the article that night, she saw words she hadn't seen in years. Graceful, visionary, elegant. The public, so quick to ridicule, was finally applauding her. For the first time, she wasn't being tolerated, she was being approved of. And that approval felt like oxygen, addictive, elusive, and worth everything. Somewhere across the city, Seo-yeon sat alone on her kitchen floor. The push notification was still there on her screen, not cleared, not opened again, just glowing faintly like the ghost of something unfinished. She didn't cry, not yet, not there. She simply sat still, trying to understand how a story she helped write had been published with a different ending, and why she wasn't even allowed to write her own footnote. The man she had believed was thinking things through had already made his decision. And the moment she realized that was the moment the silence turned to shock.
1 week after the engagement announcement shattered her world, Seo-yeon walked into the exact same ballroom where that image had been taken, the image of them. This time, she wasn't in the crowd. She was in the agenda, technically. Her borrowed blazer itched slightly at the seams, and her shoes, a size too tight, clicked softly across the marble. She carried with her a slim portfolio of textile prototypes she had developed over the past 2 years, fabrics woven from biodegradable blends, designed for both longevity and beauty. She had been invited by someone at Hanil's lifestyle division, who had seen her work at a design expo and suggested it might be a match for the brand's growing sustainability push. She was nervous, but focused. After the week she'd had, she welcomed something tangible to hold on to. She just wanted to speak about her work, share her vision, and make something real in a world that suddenly felt fake. But the meeting that had been described as an individual sit-down quickly morphed into something else. Instead of a quiet conference room, she was led to the edge of the ballroom. Yes, the same one from the photos. Same chandeliers, same glossy floors, same smell of money and cologne. A makeshift corner had been arranged near the catering station. 3 low-ranking brand staff sat on their phones while she stood, clutching her samples. She waited and waited. 23 minutes past the scheduled time, Ji-eun arrived. She didn't glance at Seo-yeon at first. Her presence swept in like a weather change, heels sharp, assistants orbiting, tablet in hand. She looked more like the subject of a press release than a person. Then their eyes met. For the briefest moment, recognition flickered. Ji-eun knew who Seo-yeon was. That much was obvious. And just as quickly, she buried it beneath a thin, professional smile. "You're Minjun's friend?" she asked. The words dipped in practiced disinterest, as though she were poking something to see if it still moved. Seo-yeon didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. Her silence was the only dignity she had left. Ji-eun turned to the samples, flipping through them without sitting down. "We're moving fast," she said, already glancing at her assistant's screen. "Send everything to procurement. If it fits, we'll follow up." That was it. She walked away before Seo-yeon could speak, not out of urgency, but authority. As if speaking to Seo-yeon too long would imply familiarity, or worse, acknowledgement. 2 hours later, a short email arrived. "After careful consideration, the proposed materials do not align with our brand direction. We appreciate your time." The words were sterile, professional, painless on paper. But something in the timing, the phrasing, the tone, told Seo-yeon the decision had been made before she even walked through the door. She went back and rechecked the deck she'd submitted, and then she found it. Days later, buried in a news brief from Hanil's own site, a new product line was announced, highlighting innovative eco-conscious fabric textures inspired by natural decay patterns. They were hers. Not exactly. The palette was softened, the motifs slightly altered, the language rewritten. But it was her concept, her DNA, just diluted, repackaged, filed under a different vendor, Seoul-B Studio. A name she had never heard before, but one that, as she would later learn, had only existed for 3 months. No one had technically broken any laws. On paper, it was clean. But she knew. She knew. And the knowing sat heavier than any violation ever could. Hatred, when it finally came, didn't arrive in fire. It arrived in silence. Seo-yeon hated the choreography of rooms like that, the ones where deals were made before anyone arrived, where "thank you for your time" meant "we've already chosen someone else," where apologies were outsourced to interns, where contracts were signed in whispers and decisions dressed themselves in politeness. She hated how easily Ji-eun had dismissed her, not out of cruelty, but out of calculation. Cold, clean, and rehearsed, like Seo-yeon's presence was inconvenient, like her work had value only when stolen and anonymized. But most of all, she hated the way Min-jin had looked past her at the gala, as if nothing tethered them anymore, as if the late-night walks, the shared dreams, the help with his graduate school essays, all of it had existed only in her memory, not his. He remembered his expression when their eyes briefly met from across the room that night. It wasn't regret. It wasn't even guilt. It was resignation. As if he had accepted the rules of this world so thoroughly, he no longer recognized who had paid the price for his comfort. Hatred didn't consume her in that moment. It settled, heavy, quiet, steady. And for the first time in her life, Seo-yeon no longer wanted understanding. She wanted the truth to speak, louder than any title, louder than any staged engagement, louder than the people who had smiled while taking everything she'd built. And that desire would soon find its way to the surface.
Anger, when it came, didn't scream. It focused. Seo-yeon didn't pace her apartment or cry into her pillow. She didn't update friends or ask them to choose sides. She didn't even replay the ballroom meeting or Ji-eun's dismissive tone in her head anymore. That phase had passed. What replaced it was colder, clearer, purpose, distilled through fury. She began with a name, Seoul-B Studio. The name had appeared in one of the press materials from Hanul a few days after her pitch was rejected. It was mentioned briefly, almost forgettably, as one of the fresh design partners leading the company's upcoming eco-conscious campaign. She hadn't heard of it before. That alone was strange. Seo-yeon kept close tabs on her industry peers. So she searched. What she found only deepened the quiet blaze that had begun to grow inside her. Seoul-B Studio had been officially registered only 3 months ago. No website, no social media presence, no employee records. It wasn't a studio. It was a shell. The business license was linked to an address that housed 4 other vendors, each tied in some way to a corporate cluster of subsidiaries feeding into Hanul Group's procurement chain. Different names, same accountant, same contact number. The illusion of variety, the reality of central control. The more she traced, the more the pattern revealed itself. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was a system. Still, suspicion wasn't evidence. So she waited and watched, and then, finally, reached out to someone she remembered from that awkward, too-public meeting near the ballroom buffet. His name was Park Do-young, a mid-level brand operations manager, always polite, always quiet, the kind of man who tried not to look up when decisions were handed down from above. She messaged him once, just a line. "You saw the switch, didn't you?" No follow-up, no pressure. He replied 3 days later, not with an answer, but with a meeting spot. They met at a plastic table outside a convenience store near Dongsan Station. It was raining lightly, so they sat beneath the overhang, the air damp with the scent of old coffee and warm concrete. Park's tie was crooked. His face was older than it should have been. He didn't look her in the eye right away. "I've worked there for 8 years," he said finally. "This isn't the first time. It's just the first time it's this obvious." Seo-yeon didn't speak. She didn't have to. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small silver flash drive. Laid it gently on the table like it might bruise. "I have a daughter your age," he said, voice low. "And if I stay silent, She inherits this kind of world. That was all. He didn't ask for protection, didn't ask for her to keep his name out of it. He already knew the risk. But he also knew, maybe for the first time in a long time, that someone might actually do something with the truth. What she found on the drive nearly knocked the breath out of her. Purchase orders, internal memos, shared drive timestamps. More than enough to build a timeline. More than enough to show a deliberate extraction of her prototype work. Colors, weaves, design phrasing. Lifted from her original files and edited into Sol B's mock-ups. The digital fingerprint led back to the shared server at Hano's lifestyle team. It was Ji-eun's executive assistant who had exported the files. It was her name on the transfer logs. But the most jarring part wasn't her. It was Min-jun's signature. Not once, 5 times. Stamped on internal approvals that had fast-tracked Sol B's onboarding. Approvals that went through just days after he told Seo-yeon he needed space. She stared at the signature field for a long time. What did that mean? Was he part of it? Had he signed them himself? Or had someone used his account while he looked the other way? Both possibilities hurt. If he was complicit, it meant betrayal. If he wasn't, it meant cowardice. Neither version left much room for innocence. But Seo-yeon wasn't interested in guessing anymore. She wasn't here to measure guilt on a scale. She had facts now, documents, proof. And she had a decision to make. It would have been easier to let it rot, to bury it. It would have been cleaner to walk away and rebuild. But Seo-yeon had done that before. She was done being silent. So she built a dossier. She spent 2 nights connecting everything: timestamps, invoice chains, cross-reference vendor registrations, audit inconsistencies, and approval trails. She laid it out like a story, not because she wanted to entertain, but because she wanted the truth to be undeniable. She sent it to Hano's internal audit committee. And at Park's quiet, trembling request, she CC'd a name he whispered across the metal table like it still carried weight. Yeon Hae-jin, an investigative columnist, sharp, fair, dangerous. She had once uncovered a housing development fraud so neatly covered up it had nearly slipped through national oversight. She wouldn't publish gossip. She only printed what could stand in a courtroom. Seo-yeon trusted her with the story. Then, before she closed her laptop, she did one more thing. She opened the message app she hadn't touched in days. Found the thread. His name still said Min-jun. She typed slowly, carefully, and sent him a message. I'm sending documents that will hurt you before they help you. Don't call me brave later. Just don't lie. She hit send, closed the tab, and finally, exhaled. Anger hadn't broken her. It had forged her. And now it had built something sharper than rage. A truth too complete to ignore.
The engagement press conference was choreographed to perfection. Fresh flowers, stage lighting, a custom LED backdrop that glowed soft gold behind the podium, together for the future. The ballroom of the Hanel Group Tower had been cleared and polished until it looked less like a space and more like a curated photograph. Rows of journalists lined the velvet rope barriers, flashes already popping before anyone stepped onto the stage. Ji-eun appeared first. Impeccable, poised, untouched by the world's noise. Her fitted dress whispered power. Behind her came Han Min-jun, dressed in a muted navy suit that, while flattering, somehow made him look smaller than usual. He smiled on cue. He said the right words. Thank you for celebrating with us today. Ji-eun spoke of alignment of values, of shared futures, of vision. A word polished so smooth it meant everything and nothing. Then it happened. A chime, subtle but not isolated. Then another, and another. The room of executives and journalists began to shift, shoulders stiffening, heads turning toward their screens. One push notification, then 2. Then the silence that followed the reading of something no one had prepared for. Audit alert. Irregular vendor activity flagged. Internal investigation triggered. See attached. A tweet followed seconds later.
From columnist Ji-eun, known for restraint, not known for dramatics. Full file tree below. Attached, a screenshot of a shared drive. Folders with names, dates, edits. One of them, Seo-yeon _original concepts _final.zip. The oxygen didn't leave the room all at once. It seeped out slowly, like a window had cracked in a winter storm. Ji-eun didn't blink. She had trained for this. Scandal was survivable, if controlled. "We are aware of misleading claims made by unverified sources," she said smoothly into the microphones. "An internal review will clarify all facts. We stand by the integrity of our brand and our partnerships." It was the kind of statement written long before it was ever needed. But what no PR draft had accounted for was what appeared in the leaked documents, specifically page 10 of the dossier. A forensic note. A system-generated log showing the e-signature history of multiple approvals, all tied to one device. Han Min-jun's personal login. Time-stamped at 2:13 a.m., 3 weeks prior. The same night he had been at the hospital with his father. The same night he'd left his tablet charging in the family lounge. The same tablet used to sign fast-tracked approvals for Solby Studio. Min-jun felt his pulse slow. He remembered that night vividly. The hum of the machines, the stillness of the corridor, how exhausted he had been, how drained. He remembered placing the device on the charging dock, assuming, naively, that his passcode was enough. But passcodes weren't walls. They were invitations to anyone who already knew where the doors were. Ji-eun was still speaking, talking about clarification, cooperation, process. He looked at her. And for the first time in their carefully constructed partnership, fear moved behind her eyes. Just slightly. Just long enough to show she wasn't invincible. "We can manage optics," she whispered, turning slightly toward him while the cameras flashed. Her lips barely moved. "You'll take temporary responsibility. We'll issue a controlled statement. Hanel will cover liabilities. It's the only way to contain this." It was the oldest deal in their world. Absorb the bruise to save the brand. Min-jun had heard that phrase so many times over the years it barely registered as a moral. It was just how things were done. But something inside him cracked, not from guilt, but from clarity. All those justifications he'd carefully built, the roof he had to protect, the family he had to save, the honor he thought he'd preserved by staying silent, they collapsed now, not because they were wrong, but because they were built on someone else's ruin. He stepped forward, walked away from the podium, past the line of cameras, stopped at the microphones, and told the truth. His voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. "Those signatures are under my ID," he said. "They were not mine. And the designs they approved were stolen from designer Han Seo-yeon. I left her to do what I thought was right. I thought favor meant safety. That favor is counterfeit." It landed like a glass shattering on marble. Not loud, but final. Every camera in the room pivoted. Every pair of eyes widened. Not just at the confession, but at who was giving it. Because a truth admitted by a victim earns sympathy. But a truth admitted by the beneficiary, that carries weight. It's not bravery. It's breaking the script. Ji-eun froze, just for a second. And that was all it took. 2 security staff moved quietly toward her assistant, whose keystrokes, verified in the dossier's forensic log, matched the export activity. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. Just lowered her head slightly, as if the rehearsal had finally ended. And then, unexpectedly, someone else stepped into the room. Park Do-yen. Uninvited. Unapologetic. He wore the same wrinkled jacket from their meeting in Dongsan, but this time he held a printed memo, slightly folded and creased from where he had hidden it.
in the lining of his sock. A signed directive from a middle manager, someone who had been acting under Ji-eun's delegation. It confirmed everything: the switch, the timeline, the internal routing of Seo-yeon's materials, the false vendor onboarding. He walked up to the audit lead and handed it over. No speech, no drama, just proof. The room, so often used to swallow noise, smooth tension, sand truth, was forced to chew. And it didn't go down easily. Somewhere outside, in an apartment far from the velvet ropes, Seo-yeon sat at her kitchen table, watching the broadcast on mute. She didn't smile, but her eyes didn't flinch either, because sometimes the loudest sound is the one that was never meant to be heard. And this time, it had broken through.
Real change doesn't arrive with music. It doesn't cue fireworks or a final line that neatly ties everything together. It arrives slowly, in quiet reports, in emails without subjects, in names being removed from title cards, in meeting rooms where chairs sit empty and no one asks why. The investigations didn't unfold like a scandal series. They dragged, then snapped. A week of silence, then a headline, then a memo. Then the real consequence. Hanu Group suspended all vendor contracts tied to Solby Studio and its associated shells. No one used the word fraud. They didn't need to. Everyone knew. Ji-eun submitted her resignation 3 days later. Officially, it was a temporary step back pending internal review. But those who could read between the lines saw the precision in her phrasing, the absence of nouns, the heavy use of regret, and the conspicuous silence of her father, whose own statement read like fog. No ownership, only distance, only shadows. Min-jun didn't wait to be asked. He resigned outright, submitting his devices and his corporate access codes in a plain white envelope. He provided timestamps, calendar logs, and forwarded every document he'd touched during the Solby approval process. Not out of martyrdom, out of clarity. That same night, he visited his father at the long-term care facility. The monitors still blinked slowly beside the bed. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. He sat in silence for a while. Then, finally, he said, "Appa, I thought saving our name meant holding one door closed. It meant opening every window." His father didn't respond, but Min-jun wasn't speaking to be heard anymore. He was speaking to let go. He asked to meet Seo-yeon once, a few weeks later. No demands, no conditions, just one quiet message. She chose a small cafe in Solcheon, one she had loved before all of this. The owner still wrote names on the chalkboard menu and gave discounts for bringing your own mug. The place smelled like toast and soy milk. It didn't pretend to be anything more than it was. Min-jun arrived on time, alone. He looked older, not in his face, but in the way he carried himself, as if something inside him had collapsed and left space for truth to settle. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't speak of the past as if it could be repaired. "I didn't just choose her," he said. "I chose a life where people are instruments, where value is measured in how quietly you can absorb things." Seo-yeon didn't reply immediately. She stirred her tea, eyes steady. "You weren't weak for trying to save your family," she said eventually. "You were weak for asking me to understand it, while you stayed comfortable." He nodded. And that was it. No argument, no apologies wrapped in explanations. He had come to speak, she had come to listen. Both did what they came to do. Sometimes closure isn't a door being opened. It's the quiet understanding that you don't need to knock anymore. Seo-yeon didn't wait for the industry to give her a second chance. She built one herself. With a small inheritance from her grandmother and a grant she had nearly forgotten she'd applied for, she opened a compact textile studio in Mapo. 2 interns joined her in the first month, young, eager, and tired of being told their work wasn't marketable enough. Park Do-hin's daughter helped her design the website. She did it in exchange for mentoring hours and fabric samples for her university project. She added a small line to the homepage, one that Seo-yeon hadn't written herself. Designs that come from process, not politics. The columnist Yoon Hae-jin called her, not for another exposé, but to ask if she could feature her in the lifestyle section this time. Just a small profile, she said. Not about what you survived, about what you're building. Seo-yeon agreed. Orders came slowly at first. A boutique in Daegu, a pop-up in Jeju. Then, one day, a mid-sized department store reached out. Not because of her name, but because they had heard her fabrics didn't fade after 2 washes and didn't shrink under heat. That was the win. Integrity, not attention. The kind of reputation that doesn't trend, but lasts. On a morning laced with frost, she received a package. No sender, just her name in careful handwriting. Inside, a black lacquer fountain pen. The same one Min-jun used to sign his MBA application years ago. The one she had filled with new cartridges when he forgot. There was a note. You gave me language when I only had excuses. The truth chose me back. I won't waste it. She didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She placed the pen in a drawer she rarely opened. Not as a shrine, as a reminder. Min-jun had chosen Ji-eun over Seo-yeon, but the truth had chosen him back. Not with romance, not with redemption, but with reckoning. No one got the ending they imagined. Everyone got the one they had earned. And for those who've ever sat in rooms where decisions are made behind smiles, for those who know what it feels like to be dismissed, overwritten, or politely erased, the satisfaction didn't come from revenge. It came from something quieter, stronger. The soft, unremarkable click of a door that Seo-yeon closed behind her as she stepped into a studio that finally, fully belonged to her.